Welcome to the Whiskey Jug, the only whiskey show on the internet that is occasionally accompanied by the sound of grinding metal. My name is Josh, and today we're doing the last class review of the Old Overholt Straight Rye Whiskey. Good stuff. So now, if you're not familiar with this brand, you probably haven't been looking, because for a really long time, until the recent big rye and cocktail boom, this was pretty much the only rye whiskey that could be found on the shelves. And for a really, really long time, it's actually also a really old brand that's been around since about 1810, supposedly. And it used to be made up in Pennsylvania, which is where back in the early 1800s, the majority of American rye whiskey was made. It's where you get a lot of the rye distilling history and things come from, that Pennsylvania area. This is a whiskey that also has a very storied history. It's something that has been passed around. The brand has been passed around from company to company over the years, and it's changed hands. Supposedly, it was the favorite whiskey of Doc Holliday. It was also, once upon a time, the medicinal whiskey for the U.S. Navy. It's currently owned by Jim Beam. So those are the details and a little bit of interesting history on it. Let's get into the review, shall we? On the nose, it's really sweet. There's caramel frosting, graham cracker pie crust, cinnamon, green apples, notes like that. There's some rye spice, but it's not nearly as high as you get in others. And the reason is that this is on the low end of the rye. This is a 51% rye mash bill. Definitely smells like it. There isn't that really good rye pop that you get with the higher quantity ryes, like something like a Wild Turkey 101 rye, or just the Wild Turkey ryes, really, where they have like the 65% rye, and then you got some of the stuff like the Bullet rye, Dickel rye, which is all MGP rye, which is the 95% rye. That's where you get that a lot more of that rye popping straight out of the glass. It's a little more subdued here on this nose. The rye pops a little bit more on the palate, but it is overshadowed by notes like caramel, lemon pepper, grains. There's some graininess to it. Very soft woodiness to it. It's not a very powerful woody character, but there's just a little bit there. And a little bit of vanilla too, just a little bit, and all of those really overshadow that rye spice. So it's not a really strong, powerful rye that comes through here, but it is still a very tasty rye. Now let's check out the finish. Again, it's a little more fruity, green apples, a little bit more sweeter. Again, it's more that graham cracker pie crust, and little bit of soft wood. It's got a very sweet finish to it, and there's just a little bit of the rye that comes through here. It's not an extremely powerful rye forward flavor. There's a lot of other things happening here, and being a rye whiskey, I kind of want a little bit more of that in there. Well, it's been open for about a year now. I believe we did this one originally November 22nd of 2013. Looking back at my notes, it's picked up a lot of more sweetness. The rye actually did start to peak up a bit. About halfway down the bottle, the rye started to show up a little bit more. Started to show a lot more. The oxygen had helped release a lot more of those rye flavors. But then once it got back down a little bit more towards the quarter of the bottle, the last quarter of the bottle here, it started to dip again. There was a lot less of that rye spice coming through again, and it didn't come across nearly as powerful again. So it was, starting at the top, not a lot of rye. About the middle, more of that rye came out, and then the way down it just kept following out to where now it's kind of more back towards at the beginning, where rye really plays a backseat, which isn't a bad thing. It's also something that makes it so it's really good in cocktails, where you want just a little bit of that rye flavor. You don't want that super sweetness from the bourbon. You want something a little bit earthier. This is great for cocktails. It's definitely something I'm going to be keeping in the home bar for cocktails and experimentation, especially when it's so cheap. It's like $22, $23 for a liter of it, and that's a lot of cocktails and experiments and things you can do, and worry about it too much. But so originally I rated this an 84, and the link to that is in the description below, or if you're on the site, it's above you. And after looking back through all of my notes and thinking about things and trying to figure out where I really stood on this one, where it is, I ended up coming in with an 83. So it did drop down by 1 point, and I still think that's a very fair, straighten that up there, it still puts it in the good whiskey range, and it really is. It's absolutely fantastic for making cocktails. Even if you just don't want something that's nice tasting but cheap for when you have a bunch of friends over, this is fantastic for that. It's, you know, it's not going to be an offensive thing. It's not going to be overly complex. It's going to be something where you want to sit down and really take your time with it, and it's going to taste great. It's also good to mix things up with a bit every now and then, because if all you're doing is drinking the big barrel strength bourbons and the cask strength scotches, which, you know, I'm a big fan of, after a while it can tire things out. And so if that's all you're experiencing and you're not changing things up, then maybe you'll take those things for granted a little bit. I know I do. And so for me, you know, I really like stuff like this to just mix up and have a glass of every once in a while. It helps me recalibrate my palate and recalibrate my thinking, because I get to the point where if you're only drinking that really good stuff, that you kind of forget what else is out there. So for me, I really like having this stuff around also just to have a glass of every once in a while, and kind of see back to, you know, alright, so this is, you know, where just an average rye whiskey comes in at. And then when I'm drinking some of the higher proof, you know, barrel strength ryes and stuff from Willet, then you kind of appreciate it a little bit more. But anyways, that's just for me. In conclusion, this is a really good, nice, tasty little 3-year-old rye, and I think it has a great place in anyone's home bar. So with that, this is the Whiskey Jug. I'm Josh. Cheers.